welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
I'm Mike SANBORN. I wanted to talk about the books I wrote. The first one is Alcoholics Collateral Damage, and the other one is a Cop in a Small City, Examining Mission and Integrity. So I will do some screen share, but I really would like comments, because it's always much more exciting when there are comments. All right, so hopefully now you see the cover to my book. Thank you, Reader's Magnet, for that design. I provided a picture, of course. That's me and my siblings when I was about 5 years old. So my older sister, Sola, there in the middle, would have been about 6, Gary 4, and Debbie sitting at the table there is probably only about a year old. So these were times when we were living in Springfield, Vermont, and Dad was working as a draftsman, and Mom was the classic 1950s stay at home, take care of the kids, take care of the house. I have another book. Bring that one up. A Cop in a Small City. This is my experiences in the Claremont Police Department in Claremont, New Hampshire. That's the back of the building. Those were my handcuffs. So I had an extra set, so I kept them. That police car, that was the publisher came up with that for their design. But both books have a sense of commonality, as I wrote about real stories, trying to convey to people what it was really like. So it was what it was really like growing up in an alcoholic family. Now, my family is a bit different. Everybody comes to mind when you talk about a violent alcoholic, you think about the father. That's not the case at all. It was my mother, and she was brutal. I have some lasting brain damage that affects my eyesight in one eye from times shortly after that picture. And the police book, I wrote about real police stories, trying to convey what I felt like, what I did, and the reasoning behind it. And I also, we had some great conversations last night about this book, about the people who were receiving end of police services. But I always try to remember this was my community. These were my people, and I always treated them well. Anybody that got arrested by me knew they deserved being arrested. So I was trying to tell people what it was like for me growing up in that household, what it was like for me being a police officer. And I hope to go beyond that. I'm hoping that people who grew up in an alcoholic family might read some of my stories and help validate what they were feeling too, and help them move on. And then I share how I actually kind of escaped that. And I did it mostly from very little guidance, actually, and it was at key times from school teacher that helped me get into college. Or at least it helped me decide to go to college. My family was very, very much against it and worked very hard against me going to college. But I did so in spite of them. And so I was the only one to graduate college in my family until my daughter was the next one. I'm the only one in my family presently that holds 2 master's degrees. My oldest daughter has just now earned her master's degree. So I like to think things have changed. My siblings, they were all disabled at an early age, mostly from smoking. I don't think any of them really got into the alcohol. And my oldest sister just last year died from her involvement with smoking and complications to it. So in the police book, I'd hope that if the police officers are reading it, to help encourage them to do what we used to call community policing. Police have a great deal of discretion, and I got, after a couple of years experience, and I did this for 6.5 years. I use a lot of discretion. Mostly because I lost confidence in the juvenile officer and the prosecution. So if I could work out something with the locals, let them off with a warning and maybe some restitution or something like that. And if they didn't follow through, well, there would be the next time. And I felt pretty confident about that. Next time, then you're going to get arrested. But also towards the end there, I really did have a big falling out I got suspended, and I went for the public hearing, and I won, and I got all the details in there. And actually, I had a good lawyer, and I was right. I was in the right. Made them look like fools. So I really couldn't continue with working in that police department, nor was I interested in any other. So I went on to another job in public works for the city of Claremont. But anyway, I hope that if police officers are reading it, they might reevaluate where they're coming from. I wrote about some really good cops, and I wrote about some really bad cops, and that's right here in this small city of Claremont. And also, I would like to see it be mandatory reading for anybody going through a police academy or studying criminology, because each and every story brings up a question of ethics. What would you do? What's right? What's wrong? If the law doesn't cover this, then what's the best resolution to go with that? So I always did it by negotiating with the person who was, the victim as well as the perpetrator, or whoever was doing the wrong to somebody. And most of the time, it could work something out. And similarly, with the alcoholic collateral damage, I'm hoping that social workers realize how our social worker missed some major, major clues. Or either that or chose not to, and that may still be the case. In fact, in the cop in a small city, I wrote about DCYS back then, in Claremont. We did 30 years of foster parenting too, so I think I'm kind of know what I'm talking about when I talk about social services, especially for children. So I'm hoping that anybody interested in any sort of social work, or even legal work and stuff, both books would be great for understanding what it's like down on the ground level, working with alcoholics, working as a police officer. I don't know if I can show a chapter in the book, but I can think I can show the table of contents. Let's see if I can find. But I can do better with it, probably with a PowerPoint. If I go back up here, so my page numbers won't match the exact page numbers in the book because when they published it, it took actually, this is showing 162 pages for the last chapter, but the book is actually over 300 pages long. So I divided the book up in developmental stages. I said I got 2 master's degrees. I've studied an awful lot of psychology and child development. So I broke these out, and not only that, it broke out pretty good with what was going on in our lives. So the first early preschool years, we were living in just typical middle class family, living in a house that my parents owned. Dad was a draftsman, but I guess for some reason they decided they wanted to move to California. He started working for a rocket company out there, so I just assumed that it was a much better job. But we were out there a couple of years, and then we came back. So those out in California, those would be my early grade school years, and I wrote about some of those experiences. And in the middle school years, that's when we first came back to Vermont. Later grade school years is when another move to Claremont, and those later grade school years is when my family system was really breaking down. My mother was, of course, the dominant alcoholic, and my father tried and tried. I can see, and I wrote several times where she beat him violently. She knocked him down on the floor one time in his middle school years, and then another time throwing beer bottles at him. She hit him, and another time I can recall her actually. She was a big woman, a farm girl. She picked him up and shook him, but you know what? He never struck back. Never fought back, and took an awful lot. So back in the 50s, there wasn't much for social support. And the classic Ozzie and Harriet and Father Knows Best shows where, the dad was the breadwinner and the mom took care of the household. That was what my father expected and my mother expected. But she also expected my father to accept her beer drinking. My mother never, she was horrible. I mean, my mother drank 16-ounce Black Label beer, the cheap ones. And we used to judge her rated level of intoxication by the number of 6-packs. These are 6-packs of 16 ounces. And if she's only had 1 6-pack, life was still livable. It's when she had the 2 6-packs in her, life became very, very miserable. And she would go for the 3 6-packs most often. And then it was outright ridiculous. I mean, she's totally incomprehensible, unreasonable, and always wanted to fight. She always looking for a fight. She didn't have my father around to fight. She wanted to fight with us. So it was hard to avoid her. If we avoided her, she came and got us. So it was really a very difficult time during those later grade school years and junior high school years. When I got older, of course, in high school, we were able to develop better strategies to avoid my mother. Working, we did manage to get out with friends. In the early years, rites of passage, such as birthdays and stuff like that, were never celebrated. Rarely did we even get a birthday cake. If we wanted a birthday cake, especially in the later grade school years and up, we had to bake our own. So I never saw any point in that. We were never allowed to go to our friends' birthday parties either. So that's not unusual for the alcoholic to keep people close to home so that they wouldn't look too closely at what we're doing. Where things really broke down is, like I said, that social worker. That social worker came every few months. Sometimes my mother was rip snorting drunk, but the social worker never talked to us. And in fact, we went outside so that they could talk inside. So there was one place, I can bring a picture up to help with the visuals. This is where we were in the middle school years. This is my, it doesn't help to enlarge that. This is my sister. And that goat was actually my pet goat. Um, I don't know why Mom got it, but for whatever reason, we used to get animals all the time. She got the goat, um, and I took care of it, and I played with it, and used to try to. We called him Herbie because Herbie the Love Bug, that Volkswagen thing, was big back then. Um, I tried to get him to pull a wagon, but Herbie wanted no part of it. He wanted to be pulled in the wagon, so I used to pull him around. Mom thought that was cute. She wanted a picture, but she put my sister there, who never played with a goat, and took the picture with her. Uh, so that's the farmhouse and the barn back there. The other thing too is that we got lots of animals came and left, cats, dogs, um, but we never took them to the vet. So if they got too sick, we put them out of their misery, put them in a grain sack with a rock, and threw them in a river. That's the way she dealt with it. But one of the things that really struck me as I reflect back, I was like 10 years old, and Herbie had his stall in the barn. One winter, that barn roof fell in, and so inside that barn looked like demolition. And she wanted me to go in and get that goat out, and I could barely climb over all these broken things and barely get that stall open to get the goat. And in fact, I had to carry the goat halfway out. And I think back about that. My mom sent her son in to get a darn goat out of a fallen down barn. Where's the priorities here for life? So that's the classic alcoholic, and that's a hot. We all have our hot buttons. That's a hot button for me to this day. I'm 69 years old now, but when somebody wants to put such value in an animal that there's humans that are suffering for that, that's a major hot button for me. And I get that. I stay in shape by running, and people, when the dogs come out to bite me, I'm going to defend myself. I carry pepper spray, and I pepper sprayed one dog and still got bit. So I carry an expandable baton, which I know how to use from the police department. But if people say that if I use that on their dog, I better keep running, that type of stuff. And, I'd love to respond. Well, pepper spray and batons work on people too, but I just bite my tongue and call the cops and make the report of a dog that should be restrained that was not. So that exists out there, and that's a hot button for me. That dog bit me, by the way. I did give it a pretty good kick. But just a little while ago, somebody shot a dog in one of our parks. I personally, that's a park that's heavily used by kids, and I've never liked dogs in that park anyway, because you get two dogs and the kid gets in between, the kid can get hurt, no matter how good you think your dog is. But one guy carried a gun, and of course I don't approve of guns in that park either. But he was carrying a gun, and a dog attacked him, and he shot it. The dog survived, but here we have the people shooting dogs in a park with their children. So yeah, you see that's a hot button for me. The children, the value of a child is far, far greater than any animal, but people somehow put their animals ahead of that. It was actually at this farm that Mom's drinking really, really got more and more out of hand. And I can remember Dad, we came home from school one time, and Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, and he was crying, and there was a .22 revolver that he had in front of him. And Mom just says, "Come on, let's go. We're going for a ride." And of course, we want to know what was going on. She says, "Well, Dad's thinking about shooting himself, so we're going to go for a ride. Either he will or he won't." I thought that was pretty crude. We didn't have a phone or anything back then, by the way. So we went for our ride, and we came back, and Dad seemed fine, but Dad ended up going to the New Hampshire Psychiatric Hospital. And then after that, he went to live with his mother. Came back a few times, but every time they got into a real bad fight, and Dad ended up leaving. And then by the time I was 11 years old, he was gone. But everywhere I went, whether it was, I used to go to my grandparents' farm. I got a picture here to help with the visual, I think. Yep. My grandfather was a vegetable farmer. So this was the farmhouse. the old barn, and then the smaller barn with the L was where they kept the horses. Um, this was before my time. When I was born, my grandfather bought his first tractor. But they had an apple orchard, a garage, a greenhouse, and you see he was the strip farmer. That's classic of the farmer of the time. So he grew vegetables and sold it to all the local markets. So, but my grandfather was very, very demanding. So Priscilla and I used to work on that farm ever since we were like 8 years old. So we spent our summers there. And at the end of the summer, my grandfather gave us each $50 to buy school clothes, which was, you could do pretty well. Sneakers were $3, and you could get pants for less than that. But we also had so that's a total of $100 for the four of us. And Priscilla's always felt cheated that we bought the clothes for our younger brother and sister too. But the money went to mom. I never had control. It didn't matter to me, but she was very bitter about it. But working for my grandfather, he used to tell me stories about his father, and I never met him. He was long dead before I was born. But he said his father could down a pint without even swallowing. Just dip it up and drain it down. So clearly, my great-grandfather was an alcoholic. And I learned through my education and working with social workers, foster care, and police, and case management at corrections. Alcoholism skips generations. So clearly, and my grandparents didn't drink. Grandma had maybe a sip of sherry 3 times a year, and my grandfather would take a shot of brandy when he came in from the cold. And that's about it. So they weren't alcoholics, but my mom sure was. And my mom had a sister and a brother. And ironically, the brother, of course, he was an alcoholic, and he went and got into the marijuana too. My Uncle Bernie. And my Aunt Alice, she never drank at all, but she married an alcoholic. So all 3 of my grandparents' children ended up in divorces. They were married 50 some odd years. And that's been kind of classic in my family. I've been married 47 years. But anyway, my grandfather was very, very demanding. And for some reason, I could never do anything right. No matter how hard I tried. I had to hold the tomatoes a certain way and the cucumbers another way and the corn yet another way. But what really bothered me, I didn't mind learning. What bothered me is the next time we did it, I wasn't doing it right, even though I was doing it the same way he said before. So it was constantly changing. Oh, yeah, Fairgoer, 1921. Thank you for your question. Do I have a pet now? Not me exactly, but my daughters who live with me, we have 4 cats in this house, and we just got a Australian Shepherd. It's I think it's about 5 months old now, and I'm having a blast with that Australian Shepherd. So yeah, and we always had a dog and cats when we were raising our kids. But so I don't personally own a cat, but there's, like I say, there's 4 cats and a dog in this house, and I interact with all of them. But yeah, my grandfather was very demanding, and he could never do anything right. And my mother is the same way; they never could do anything right. And like you say, the standards were so terribly elusive; I could never please them. And I think that's why it's very common that children of alcoholics work so hard to try to please people. Fairgoer 1955. Thanks for the question or the comment. Nice old picture. It brings me back to old days where in life isn't all about internet. Yeah, the internet crap, right? Yeah, but I enjoy the internet too. I enjoy technology. I'm a teacher now. And have been for quite a long time. When I left the city of Claremont, I went into teaching, and I teach science. So I watched the technology develop. The first computer was when I was in high school. That was back in the late 60s. We didn't have computers in college. I earned my own money and scholarships and everything. I was the one in the dormitory that had the state of the art for writing reports, and that was an electronic Smith Corona typewriter with correction tape in it. But I love the computers now. And of course, that's how I wrote these books. I love the technology to be able to research stuff right away. Yeah, Fairgoer 2073. Do I suffer any abuse from the alcoholic? Lots of it. That whole book. The most dramatic thing is I got brain damage that affects this right eye. My two eyes don't work together at all. That was from shortly after the picture on the cover out in California. We were playing when my mother didn't want us to play, and she called us in, and her classic was to make us kneel down. So after I kneeled down, she had a broom in her hand, and she clobbered me over the head. She knocked me unconscious. So that's the most obvious physical abuse. But there's always the personality traits. I am a perfectionist, no doubt about that. But I've learned not to be so demanding on the people around me as my mother was. So always doubt, always anxiety. And when I was transitioning through high school and into college, I look back now and I see that I suffered quite a lot of depression. There were times in college when I just really couldn't focus on studies, and I just went for long walks. So that's certainly, I was depressed, and that was my coping mechanism. I did not want my children exposed to alcoholic, and my mother was not very good at that. Mira, thank you for the comment. As a cop, do you always receive death threats? Not a single one. Like I say, I policed, like this was my community. I grew up mostly in Charlestown when we came back. So from like maybe 8 years old on up, I grew up in Charlestown, which is the town next to Claremont. I chose to come live in Claremont because Claremont has better emergency services, and I wanted to be a police officer in Claremont. That's when I came out, got out of the Army. We came to and lived in Claremont. But I always treated people like they were a member of my community. If they got, of course, I had to make arrests. I mean, there was just blatantly obvious that this person needed to be arrested and answer to the charges. Anybody that I arrested knew they needed to be arrested. And in later years, when I got done police stuff, I did some case management for our county jail. I live a mile and a half from the county jail. Anybody going to court from the county jail goes by my house. There's a great big sign I got in front of my house that says SANBORN. They all know where I live. I have never, ever personally had anybody do any threats to me or come to my house. I have no fear of that. I've always treated people well. In the jail environment, I had a lot of discussions with people about that, and it's really kind of funny is that I could be working down the bottom of my property. I live 700 feet off the road too, so I got a sense of security there. But I could be working down by the end of the road, and one of my former arrestees or people that was imprisoned would see me and just stop and chat with me and tell me how they were going. So Fairgoer 1669, what's the hardest part about being a cop? Working with other cops. No, I don't need to think about that. There were some real jerks, and everybody wanted to be the better cop. Let me tell you this: when you see something going on in that, there's some commonalities. There's some sort of a culture that exists in all departments. When you see something that's hitting the news, look at the cops and how the cops are interacting. Everybody's trying to be the better cop, the real cop. And I describe it, because I'm a science guy, as an exponential thing. One cop is going to do either the right thing or the wrong thing, depending on his personality. And I like to say that 75% of the time, the cop's going to do the right thing. They all think they're doing the right thing, but for you and I would say, well, that 75% of them are good cops, and they're going to do the right thing. You bring in another cop, and all of a sudden, there seems to be a competition there, and the problem is not doubled, it's squared. Bring in a third cop, square it again, now it's 9 times out of control. So that, to me, is the hardest part. Another hard part is cops don't always tell the truth. They stretch the truth. And if there's 2 or 3 of us involved in an incident, guess what? We're all 3 of us testifying in court. And I've had to take the stand and completely contradict my fellow cop, because I was going to tell the truth. An example is and you watch this too. One of their techniques is to get into the personal space of the other person so that they will put their hands up and touch the other cop or even push them back. I had an incident like that, and that cop charged him with assault. So when we go to court, when the lawyer was asking me about that, that other cop, I described it. Yes, it was during a fingerprint. I was actually fingerprinting the guy when this was happening in this exchange. They hated each other for whatever reason, but I was not having any trouble. I wish the other cop would, but there needed to be cops in there while I was fingerprinting. But he got up to the other guy and he literally stepped on that guy's toes, and he got right in his face, and they were yelling at each other. And so that out of instinct, the guy I was fingerprinting I had one hand, the other hand he had free. He just put it up and put it on the other cop's chest. That's when so I described that in court. And of course the judge threw that charge out, but it was my arrestee, and the things I arrested him for were good. And he was convicted on that. But that's the hardest part, is the cops coloring it to their favor when it really, I'm a science guy. I write lab reports, and I write lab reports so that it can be recreated. And I take that same sort of philosophy into writing my police reports and giving testimony. And both these books, I'm trying to describe, especially the police book, I'm trying to write it with the accuracy of a police report, but with so that somebody who's not a police officer could understand what I was writing about. So I really invite you to read that book, and you'll see, especially towards the end. I start talking about the conflicts. I divided that book up into the first. It's a collection of stories, and then I grouped them into categories. So I made a category, community policing. So this is a lot of interaction with the public. Then I talked about domestic disturbances. That's the most dangerous thing, because you're going into somebody else's house, they're fighting, whatever. So I got that. And then I got a section on juvenile justice with several stories. Several stories about motor vehicle accidents, driving while intoxicated. I got several things about car chases, burglaries, homicides. I was first officer on a really nasty homicide. And I write about 3 different homicides here. I got a whole section on dealing with mentally ill. And then I call what's called internal conflict. And this is where I was having trouble with my fellow officers. And then eventually I got suspended. But like I said earlier, I did my job right, and I had good reports, and the other cops were lying, and that was proved in the public hearing. So Mira, what is the reason you quit the job? Did you quit? I quit, and I quit because of that. It was over a foster kid. The police accused the foster kid of stealing a gun, and he did not. His cousin did. But being a small community and being the cop that everybody trusted, it wasn't the kid that stole the gun. It was the kid's friend that brought the gun to the police department. And he specifically asked for me, of all things. So not knowing, the dispatcher didn't know either, called me in, and this kid just all of a sudden just stuck out this thing and said, "Here, take this." And I took it. It was the gun wrapped up in the. So they try to say that I maneuvered it in order to get my foster kid off, which was not true at all. And then in the public, that's why I asked for the public hearing, and they really looked like idiots, is that they actually put in, my defense attorney didn't, they put that kid that stole the gun on the stand, and he admitted to stealing the gun. So they really looked stupid. So of course the police commission reinstated me with back pay and all that. And then it was, basically impossible, when you have that kind of a falling out with the administration, it really was kind of an impossible job. But suddenly, over in Public Works, they called it an industrial pretreatment coordinator, somebody who helped regulate the businesses using the sewer. And with my biology background, and an extra $10,000 a year, that was perfect to go there. So that's where I went. A total of 13 years at the city of Claremont, half of police. Why did I chose the title? I wanted people to realize that, of course, well, there's a lot of talk about an alcoholic and their recovery and the harm they've done to themselves, and only a little bit of focus out in the people around them. So in my book, I just kind of took us stage by stage through these developmental years and how it affected, especially me, because I know my feeling, but things are going on in that alcoholic family. Like I wasn't always aware of what's going on. I learned later as adults how brutal, terrible, horrible treatment my mother did to my older sister. I, of course, saw some of it, but there was a lot of it I didn't see. And we were all harmed by that. I was lucky to get into college, but all three of my siblings smoked. It's funny, but my mother smoked only off and on because she wanted more of the money for the beer rather than cigarettes. But my siblings all smoked. That was kind of, and at an early age too, like 10, 11 years old. My greatest failure as a cop, and what did I learn from it? Great. Well, I used to cut people a lot of breaks. So, I could cut somebody a break. I can't remember anybody getting seriously hurt, but, when I try to trust somebody that they're going to change, they're going to make restitution or something, and they don't. But like I say, as I got more and more experience, I got less and less worried about that because, if I let them off this time and they haven't learned their lesson, they're going to do it again, and I will, or my colleagues will get them. Greatest, I would probably say, it's not being able to read the administration and trusting the administration and the police department to do the right thing. I came from, my grandparents were Catholic, so they had strong values there. I went to a Catholic college, St. Michael's College, strong values there. I went into the Army. I got a commission, strong values there. So that's why police appealed to me, because I thought, well, there's strong values there. So I'd say probably my greatest failure was to be able to read the unethical practices in the police department until I was well tarnished or rejected, I guess, because I wouldn't follow through. It seems sad to me that you talk to the criminals, and the criminals have this "don't rat on each other" philosophy. It just stunned me that police have the same thing. You just don't rat on other cops. You don't expose their lies. So I guess that's my greatest. And what I learned from it, I learned I didn't want to be part of that. So that's why I moved. Yeah, if we say collateral damage, Mira, it is very complicated. Absolutely. So collateral damages, I wanted to focus on not so much the damage my mother did to herself, but the damage she did to the people around her. There were some car accidents, and I have faced people down with a gun as a cop. I was in the Army with the artillery and all that. I've never been so scared in my life than riding in the car with the alcoholic driving. Because I was very young. Like I said, Dad was gone entirely by the time I was 11 years old. But so a lot of times, I remember like 6 and 8 years old, speeding down the highway with a drunk person behind the wheel. And my mother usually was the driver, and she would be beating my dad, bam, when she was mad. And of course, the car would be doing this stuff whenever she swung, because she's drunk and she's big and she's delivering that forceful blow. And then came the threat: I'm going to drive this car into that tree right now and kill us all. And you know how terrifying. We didn't have seatbelts back then. Cars didn't have seatbelts then. They weren't even an option. So I had enough knowledge to know that if I can hold on somehow. So I used to hold on to the door handle, And of course, when the car's swinging like that, I was realizing I couldn't even hold onto the door handle. So what my go-to place was to sit on the floorboards between the front, behind the driver, and in front of the back seat, the bench, and I'd get down in there and think that maybe I would be the only survivor of this accident. So I'm going to drive into that tree right now and kill us all. But then they go by it. So then there's more argument, and well, I'm going to drive into this bridge or something and kill us all. So that actually was the most scariest time of my life. When was I most satisfied with my job? Fair go, 69 again, yeah. I'm most satisfied with my job as a teacher. There's, of course, a lot of frustrating things. You're reading a lot of frustrating things, but to have that relationship with a student and see their reaction. I can use one from my teaching experience. When I was teaching at I graduated from Fall Mountain Regional High School in Alston, New Hampshire. I guess they say Langdon now, but they called it. They used the mailing address back then. I graduated from there, and then I went back to teach there. And I had two girls in my biology class, and they sat right up front. And what they came to me on the first day and says, "We don't like it when you call on us, but I promise you this: we will get A's in your class. We're good students. You know, they've been with each other. They were 10th graders, so they were pretty confident." So I said, "Well, great," because I was a tough teacher. So they were in my high level biology class, and sure enough, they were getting A's. But we had a rogue principal, and she came in to do an observation on me, and she wrote me up badly for not calling on these two girls. And I said to her, "You're missing the whole point. I mean, these girls, I have a deal with them. They're right up front. We do chat in back and forth, but I don't have them announce anything in front of the rest of the class." Several years later, I have her brother, quite a few years later, he was like 6 or 8 years younger than her. I had her brother in my class. He came to me and said his sister just got accepted to veterinary school in California, and she wanted me to know that. So that is so extremely satisfying. I guess I could say another satisfying thing in being alert is paying attention to the students and finding out when they have problems at home and alerting social services to go. So Mira, did I regret that you quit your job as a cop? I don't think so. I went into the Army looking for the 20-year retirement because that's what the recruiters promised. But when I got in there and got my commission, and I realized that only 5% of you see, they call it the RIF, reduction in force. If you don't get promoted, you get dumped. you because they only can promote so many, and that magic number was the colonel, and only like 5% was going to be colonel. And by the way, all the West Point grads, and of course I was OCS, I wasn't West Point, were going to get it. So I figured, well, that's a hopeless cause. So then I looked at the police and their 20-year retirement. That's why I changed them. So Mira, how did I cope with the collateral damage I've made? It would be to my brother, I suppose. We fought all the time as siblings, but I have helped my brother several times through life. When he dropped out of high school, but it was and I think we're headed to times again. The short machine shop, the machinist. There's nothing wrong with my brother's math. He certainly can do math. But he needed to know a little bit of trigonometry to get the job he wanted. So I showed him, and he learned it quickly, and he got the job. And there's been times through life that I've loaned him money, and my brother was one person who was good about getting the money back to me. So I was mean to him when we were growing up. And I don't know. I suppose my family around me, because I am a bit of a perfectionist and I have high standards, and they all grew up to be the same. But I'm getting the payback now. My daughters have high standards and expectations of me, and I'm very happy to help them out with things. But I do not drink, nor do I smoke, and no one in my family does. So I think probably have avoided causing collateral damage. I look at my siblings, and they weren't quite so lucky. All their kids, they didn't have the parenting skills because they learned it from my mother, who didn't obviously have great parenting skills. And I suppose you could say I caused damage to my nephew and nieces because I just looked the other way. I didn't want to be involved. There were a couple of things I did as a police officer I wasn't proud of, and you know what? I wrote about them. I probably handled some people more roughly than I needed to, but they didn't really get hurt. I had grabbed somebody by the throat after he almost broke my leg, told him to stop kicking me, or he would die. But he's all right. Ironically, years later, he came. I was the water and sewer superintendent, and advertised for an employee, and he came to apply for the job. Came in right into my office, right past the secretary. Came into my office, sat down, and said, "Here are you hiring?" I said, "Yep." He says, "Any chance you hire me?" And I looked at him and I said, "Nope." He goes, "Didn't think so," and he got up and left. But yeah. He was violent, and my the guys that worked for me all knew him too, and he was a violent guy. And I could just, and there's no way I wanted to hire him. I didn't want fistfights in the trenches out there. But yeah, yeah, I can't, because we suppress a lot of thoughts too that we're not proud of. But I've certainly received a lot more collateral damage than I have caused. All right, there you go. 2078. You're now a teacher. Any plans of writing a children's book? Not really. I am doing a sequel to this in Alcoholics Collateral Damage, because this takes it all the way up to when I started college. I am already like 30 pages into the sequel of how it's affected me throughout my life. This one's not nearly so emotional because I was in control at this point. I wasn't in control during those times in the first book. I don't know. Maybe I will think about it after I finish this book. I was trying to write a book for kids that are in an alcoholic family, but I don't know how popular that would be, because alcoholics control what comes in and goes out of their house very tightly. So I'm not sure. Maybe I could write something for teachers on how to observe kids in class. I try to tell my colleagues that if you got a class of 24, I guarantee you got at least one, probably two, maybe even more, depending on the area you're teaching in. Of kids that are suffering just like I suffered when I went through school. I was the quiet kid in the back, just did my work. No way did I want to do anything that would cause the teacher to call home. But we didn't have a phone anyway, but the note would go home, and it would have to be signed by the parent and brought back. So maybe I could write something about teachers and how to at least be that person. Because like I said, she was my algebra teacher, algebra 1 in 8th grade, and then algebra 2 in my sophomore year. That was the one that recognized me and convinced me to go to college. So maybe I could write something along that line to help teachers identify that student, and be that significant person for them. And I've tried to do that too, all the time. and I know my limits. I can't go intruding into the house. And if I see something though, I definitely will say something. Uh, there was an incident when I was teaching. It was a boyfriend girlfriend thing, and I could hear only bits and pieces of what he was saying. But he was telling the girl how no good she was and she'd be nothing without him. That, of course, is a big red flag. And she's crying. That's what got my attention first off. So I listened a little more intently. Went to my guidance folks, and then I called home, and I spoke to Dad. And I said, Dad, I'm not calling you as your daughter's teacher. I'm calling you as a dad to dad. I said, your daughter's under a great deal of stress with that boyfriend, and I am really worried about her. And sure enough, 3 days later, the gym, because the whole faculty were all alerted to the problem here. And the gym teacher, when they went outside, noticed that she didn't come out. So she sent another student back in, and sure enough, she had taken an overdose of medicine, and then she was in the locker room. So that was an ambulance call, and off she went. She's fine now. And in fact, I saw him in jail when I did case management in jail. But yeah, she lived through it. So I got accommodation for that. But that's one of the things I'm most proud of. So, Mira, am I handling preschoolers, high school, or college students? Mostly high school. I'm teaching at a private school now. I've retired in the Claremont and then the New Hampshire retirement system from, I got 28 years with the police, corrections, and teaching. So I'm collecting a pension there, so I can't do any more teaching. I'll lose my pension in New Hampshire, but I'm right next to Vermont, so I'm teaching in a private school in Vermont. And that's middle school. First time I've taught middle school in my life. So I've taught mostly high school, and I have taught as an adjunct at the community college. I've taught chemistry, physiology, and then environmental science at the community college level. But mostly high school science, high school biology, physics, chemistry. I'm a true blue science guy. And I'm enjoying teaching middle school, by the way. These are wonderful kids. They're curious, and they love their activities. And I can take all my high school stuff, look at the standards for middle school, and just adapt my high school teachings. Take out some of the details, and do pretty much lots of different activities. So it's a nice, easy job for me, and pays pretty good. And I'm enjoying it. And these kids have a lot of support at this private school, so they have counselors and all sorts of medical support and stuff. So it's a pretty good environment to be working. So, Mira, was your transition from a cop to teacher hard? No, actually, it was pretty easy because while I was a cop, if anybody can be a cop. In fact, one of my superiors only had a GED, and here I am with a master's degree, and this idiot with a GED, which was one of the problems I had. But I did say, well, I've got this college degree, and nobody else in that department did. So I said, I want to do something that requires a college degree. So I started substitute teaching. So I was, and I enjoyed that very much too. So whenever I had a day off or something, I made myself available to. And when I was working off shifts, I was available to substitute teach. And I mostly preferred the high school. I did some junior high school teaching, but I stayed busy and that paid off because when there was a juvenile problem, quite often I knew the kid too. So that's one of the reasons I was successful. And the guy with the GED was a juvenile officer. So clearly I did not get along well with him at all. But once he took a case, it was confidential. So I never knew what really happened to the case. But no, it was really easy, the transition. And what compelled me was the teaching certification. New Hampshire has pretty high standards for teacher certification. And I tried to backdoor. It can now. There's all sorts of programs to do that, but back then there wasn't. So essentially I had to enroll in a teaching program so I ended up enrolling in environmental studies, a master's program with teaching certification. So that's how I ended up with the 2 master's degrees. So I had to take like a year, and I did it accelerated. So I was like a year off. Fortunately, my wife's a nurse, so we still had a pretty good income while I concentrated on getting that master's degree. So it actually went pretty easy, and then I got a job teaching coming right out of that master's program. My teaching philosophy, if I go over 2078, everybody can learn. Jimmy Carlin was when I did that master's degree for teaching certification, I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. So I took teaching methods for high school and teaching methods for middle school. And Jimmy Carlin was the middle school teaching methods guy. And he said something to me that was really quite profound. He says, I may not be able to bring them as far as I want to, but I will bring them further than they are now. So, of course, with that sort of philosophy, you can't fail. But I still want to bring them further than they really wanted to go or expected to go. And to get them to see their own learning, to discover things for themselves, what I've come to realize that a lot of times as a teacher, you're trying to dispel some misconceptions. People, they don't have the right idea about how something works. So you can stand up there and you can tell them, well, you're wrong. This is the right way. And chances are that they're not going to do it. But if you can get them to check out their own misconceptions and evaluate it and experiment with it or study it or research it, somehow get them to realize what they have in their head now is a misconception or it isn't quite right, and experiment and develop it themselves. So that's kind of my philosophy, especially as a science teacher. I mean, you can do a lot, and I got great resources in this. And most of the school I went to, I used to say I can teach science in the parking lot if I have to, but I will use whatever resources I have and get the kids to design their own experiments and check out their own thing. It's really great. And, I teach in physics class one time. I posed a problem for the student, and I had the brightest kid in class says, well, obviously it's going to be this. I says, really? And actually he was wrong. So let's check it out. So he's halfway into the experiment. I made him set up the experiment himself, design his own experiment, and he's halfway into it, and he goes, I was wrong. I said, yep, I knew that. But if I told you, you wouldn't have believed me, would you? And he goes, no. So getting people to dispel their own misconceptions is the best way. If only I could do that with the people on social media. But yeah, it's fun. Everything's all about good. I teach online too. The Virtual Learning Academy here in New Hampshire, they're big on developing a relationship with a student and trust in the classroom. The relationship and trust is a big thing. So then when we are trying to push them to the limit, they're willing to go there for me and willing to check it out. And that will carry forward. They'll carry that on into their other studies and hopefully into their lives too. So I said, okay, I'm seeing we're getting near the end of our time here. So I'm going out. I do have a website. It's been scrolling across the bottom of the screen, author gmichaelsanborn.godaddysites.com. I also am on Twitter, GMSanborn. You'll find a YouTube channel. Just search G. Michael Sanborn. You'll find it. I have several presentations there. And I'm also on Twitter, Facebook. You can find me there too. And Instagram. And I welcome contact with me or email me directly at gmichaelsanborn@gmail.com. I'd be happy to answer you there. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Reader's Magnet. You've been wonderful for me. I'll be back on again tomorrow. And hope others will join me. I really enjoy the questions. Thank you all and have a good evening.